Hard to believe we're almost halfway through this 10 session series over the course of multiple weeks, more than 10 weeks, because we intersperse other topics, as many of you know, from week to week, but almost halfway through this series of topics. So we're really excited to have you back on Webinar Wednesday. It's going to be a really interesting discussion about how to avoid mistakes that we see people making in e-learning. And we'll talk both about mistakes that they make in choosing an e-learning platform and maybe touch on a couple things when it comes to implementation that we see folks not necessarily think far enough ahead about, and that can create some challenges as well. So as you know, at ATS Lab Midwest, we work with a number of different suppliers of e-learning. We have implemented e-learning platforms with literally hundreds and hundreds of customers in a lot of different versions of e-learning. We are really, really picky about which products we like to put in place with our customers, because I can tell you from experience, there are some great and amazing e-learning platforms out there, and there are some not so great e-learning platforms out there. So today we're going to talk about when you're choosing an e-learning platform, and what we mean by e-learning is we are using a interactive, usually should be highly interactive, multimedia-based platform for delivering learning on theory and on hands-on skills using virtual trainers in learning both of those topics, learning both of those competencies via an online platform, which at times can be connected to a hands-on trainer as well. So let's get started with these 10 mistakes that we see people making when choosing or implementing an e-learning platform. And we will begin with number one. Number one is too much video and not enough interaction. I can tell you by looking at a lot of different e-learning platforms that some companies will take a video or a series of videos and place them in a learning management system and call that e-learning. Let's be clear. Watching a video is not e-learning. E-learning should be very, very interactive. It should be requiring the learner to interact with the content literally every 15 or 20 seconds. Gone are the days where we put a VCR tape in a VCR or even a DVD in a DVD player and watch some ancient training platform. E-learning should be highly interactive. It should keep the learner's engagement and attention throughout the experience. And let's be honest, just watching a video gets old in a big, big hurry. So the first mistake we see people making is choosing a platform that is not interactive, that is just videos masquerading as e-learning. So be careful for that. The second e-learning mistake we see is this. E-learning can very quickly become out of date, especially in fields that are advancing rapidly. Fields like IT, fields like network security, fields like IIoT, Industry 4.0, advanced manufacturing, automotive technology. These technologies are advancing at warp speed. We talk about that often here on Webinar Wednesday, that we live in an exponential economy where products double in price performance every 12 to 18 months. So what that means is that your e-learning has to be not only current today, but you have to be partnered with a provider that will make sure that it is current tomorrow, and the day after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. And the way that we do that is to make sure that the innovator, to make sure that the provider of the e-learning platform is constantly innovating their product, is constantly adding new technology, is constantly removing obsolete technology so that the e-learning platform is constantly up to date. And we see so many platforms that were up to date 5 or 10 years ago, and somebody chose them, and maybe they were really good 5 or 10 years ago, but guess what? Technology changed on them, and now all of a sudden they are teaching their current employees old technology, which is not an efficient way to upskill our employees. So number two e-learning mistake is choosing an out-of-date e-learning platform, or choosing a platform that may be current today, but for whose provider does not have a planned strategy for making sure that it is current tomorrow, that they don't have a planned strategy for research and development and innovation in their platform. So make sure you're partnering with the right provider in that case as well. Number three e-learning mistake is a non-customizable platform. Let me give you an example. We work with industrial employers all over the Midwest, and in some cases all over the country. And the technology that is prevalent in northern Wisconsin may not be the same technology that is prevalent with manufacturers in Detroit, Michigan, or for that matter, in the oil and gas field in Williston, North Dakota, and elsewhere. So it's really, really important for us to think about the fact that we need a e-learning platform that we can customize to every single individual learner and every single company. If your company is really big, for example, on pneumatics, but doesn't offer a lot of hydraulics or doesn't require a lot of hydraulics expertise, then why would you waste time teaching your team members a lot about hydraulics? It doesn't add value to your organization. So we need to make sure that the platform, regardless of which one it is that we're choosing, is customizable, that we can pick and choose from courses and from modules to make sure that we are targeting the individual competencies that we want to teach as closely to the individual learner as possible. So e-learning mistake number 3, non-customizable platform. You want to make sure that platform is entirely customizable to the specific learner and to your company. E-learning mistake number 4 is offering the e-learning to disinterested learners. What we mean by this is you have all kinds of people in your organization. You have people who are the early adopters, the ones who are excited to adopt new technology, to learn new things. And every single organization has at least a couple, some more have at least a couple of the folks who will rip on an idea, who will disagree with an idea, who will poo-poo an idea before it even gets off the ground. And what we say to our clients who are implementing e-learning is if you have people who you know are just going to complain, if you have people who you know, no matter how good this is for them, they will find something bad for it. If you have people that you know will sit through the e-learning and then go back to the lunchroom or back out on the shop floor and tell everybody else what a miserable experience it was, whether it was or not, just because that's the kind of people that they are, don't offer them the option of being a part of it. We mean that. You are better off keeping an individual from a learning opportunity than putting an individual in the learning opportunity if they're not going to invest their own time and their own energy in learning what they are supposed to be learning. And worse yet, if they are going to take their own disinterest and their own dissatisfaction with the program back to everybody else and try and taint their views on the e-learning platform. So in choosing and implementing an e-learning platform, if you have disinterested learners, if you have people in your organization that you know are not going to be interested or know are not going to be advocates, then leave them out of the program. Don't waste your time, your resources, or for that matter, their time trying to teach them something when you know it isn't going to benefit either them or the organization. So the 4th e-learning mistake, if you have disinterested learners, if you have people who are not going to get excited about the platform, leave them out of the program. Now, I should point out that that doesn't mean that you have the people who maybe are in the middle or maybe a wait and see kind of folks that aren't going to be excited about it up front, but are at least going to be open-minded. If you have those folks on your team, by all means, include them in the program. Make sure you select the right solution, make sure that you implement it the right way, and you will be successful with your e-learning. E-learning mistake number 5 is one size fits all. We've talked about this already on Webinar Wednesday. I still see organizations who take a maintenance technician who has been in the organization for 29 years and somebody else who's been in the organization, another maintenance tech who's maybe been on board for 29 days, and put them in exactly the same room and teach them exactly the same thing. That is generally not fair to either one of the individuals, because chances are that the content, if it fits for the person who's been with you 29 days, is way too parochial for somebody who's been doing that job for 30 years. Not always, but almost always, you're going to be teaching them things that they already know. And those individuals are going to become your disinterested learners. They're going to be the ones that start to say, why are you wasting my time and the company's resources putting me in this program to teach me something I already know? Now, the person who's brand new, who maybe doesn't know everything, is still learning. If we're going to make this program applicable to somebody who's been with us for 29 years, it's going to be way over the head of somebody who's been with us for 29 days. And those individuals do not blame themselves. Maybe internally they do. Maybe they feel stupid. Maybe they feel like they're not prepared for the job. Maybe they're a little bit intimidated, but almost none of them, experience tells me, will admit to that. Instead, what they will do is blame the e-learning platform, blame the learning opportunity for the fact that it's too far over their head. A great world-class e-learning platform will have a mechanism whereby we can examine and assess an individual learner's current competencies and place them in an e-learning program where the knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. We call it lean learning. It drives all of the waste out of learning. We are not teaching people things they already know, and we are also not teaching people things they don't have the prerequisite knowledge to be able to understand and implement. So it's a great way to make a really, really efficient e-learning program. So number 5 e-learning mistake is implementing a one-size-fits-all plan or program where everybody sits through exactly the same content. The way to do it is to select a platform that has an e-assessment model that can enable us to assess a learner's current competencies and start the learning where the knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. Number 6 on our list of e-learning mistakes is putting e-learning to work, implementing an e-learning program when we have a supervisor who is apathetic, or worse yet, isn't excited or doesn't think that the learning program is a good idea. Now, this happens often. If you think about the job of a supervisor in a manufacturing plant, that individual's job is to produce product. That individual's job is to meet production standards. That individual's job is to make sure that products are shipping on time, that people are working safely, that we have the right people at the right lines at the right time to make sure that production continues. They're not worried about training somebody for a job typically that individual might be doing in a year or two. The job of most supervisors is to address what is going to kill us first and what is happening today. So as a result of that, sometimes even the supervisors will turn on the e-learning platform and they'll roll their eyes and say, why do I have to pull my people off the floor and put them in the e-learning program for 2 hours a week or an hour a week or 8 hours a day for 3 months or whatever it is that we decide? They will have a little bit of concern about the time that we are putting their individual employee in the program. So if we have supervisors that aren't at least going to give the e-learning platform a chance, if we have supervisors who aren't at least going to say, yeah, I recognize the importance of training our people. I know it's going to create some short-term challenges for me and how I run my department, but I recognize the long-term value of this. And so I am going to promote it. I'm going to support it. And I'm going to make sure that my people are in front of the e-learning when they need to be. If we don't have folks like that, we're better off not producing or not beginning our e-learning program in their department. Pass those folks over for supervisors that will understand the value of e-learning, will understand the value of an industrial learning program so that we can get the maximum value out of those people and out of our program. What will happen is those apathetic supervisors, when they see your program working in other departments, will jump on board. Then they'll be interested. They'll want to know why their employees can't be a part of it. Their employees may even ask them, how come we can't be a part of it? And they will come along for the ride eventually. But don't start with those people that you know are not going to be excited. Don't start with those supervisors that you know are going to be apathetic about the e-learning initiative. So that's number 6, is stay away from your apathetic supervisors when implementing e-learning. E-learning mistake number 7 is a poor learning management system. These are often called LMSs, learning management systems. This is the software that manages the learning. So many companies will already have these on their own, where they actually have a platform where their employees can log in, they can access their e-learning, they can see what courses are coming up next, they can see how they're performing on their assessments, on their quizzes, they can see what the current plan is as far as their career development and so on. So many companies have learning management systems already. It's really important for us to have a very flexible learning management system. We want to make sure that it's SCORM 1.2 compliant, not to get too wonky, but that will enable the LMS to share information directly with the e-learning provider. And so when an employee goes into the LMS, they go into the company's LMS, it looks like the content is coming directly from the company. They're not logging into some separate LMS unless that's the way that we choose to deliver the learning. So make sure that we've got the right learning management system. Now that can work 2 ways. You can have a learning management system that the company already owns, and then we SCORM the content into the company's learning management system for the benefit of the learner, or you can leverage a company's an e-learning company's LMS learning management system that is associated directly with their e-learning. Regardless, there are a handful of things that are really, really important. We've already talked about the ability to access information. We want to make sure that we can customize courses. We want to make sure that the learning management system is producing the right kind of data. Who has taken the courses? How have they performed on the pre and post quizzes? How have they performed on their e-assessments? Where are they in their learning program? How much time is it taking? And what dates are they going through their e-learning program, so that we know exactly what they've been into, how often they've logged in, what courses they've been through, and how they performed. In a good learning management system will provide all of this and the reporting that'll be necessary for one of our e-learning mistakes, avoiding one of our e-learning mistakes that is coming up. So number 7 e-learning mistake is not vetting out the learning management system, making sure that it's easily navigable, making sure that it delivers the kind of information that you want for your learners and for your company, and delivers it in a way that it's easily accessible and easy for the employee to navigate. On to e-learning mistake number 8, no CSuite support. We've already talked about the value of having an engaged learner. We've already talked about the value of having an engaged supervisor. If you don't have support from the front office for the e-learning platform, for the upskilling program, don't bother starting. And here's why. E-learning and employee learning is expensive. There's no way around it. And it's not the cost of the e-learning itself. Usually, most of the e-learning platforms are very, very affordable. The cost is taking an employee and putting them in a classroom, putting them in a learning lab, taking them off of the shop floor, taking them out of their day-to-day job. It's the opportunity cost of what they're not getting done while you're paying them to learn. Now, the truth of the matter is, if we are going to have a vibrant workforce in the future, if we are going to have a workforce that understands advanced manufacturing technology, if we are going to have a workforce that understands Industry 4.0 technology, we have to train them today. The vast majority of people working in manufacturing 10 and 20 years from now are people that already work in manufacturing, in a world of manufacturing that is changing and evolving at warp speed. And so we have to have a program to upskill them, to make sure that their skills and their competencies remain current if we are to have a vibrant company in the future. But the truth is, not every single executive recognizes this. Not every CEO, not every president, not every vice president of operations, not every chief financial officer recognizes the importance of continuing education and lifelong learning. And especially when the rubber hits the road, especially when they have to start paying people continually escalating hourly wages to sit in a classroom, a lot of them will turn away from it. They'll say things like, why are we paying so-and-so $15, $20, $30, $40 an hour to sit in training? Why are we investing $10, $20, $30,000, in some companies' cases, $300, $400, or $3 million or $4 million? Why are we investing that kind of money in training? And the answer is because if you don't, everybody else's workforce is going to get ahead of yours and you will no longer be relevant. But with that said, if C-suite doesn't understand the value, if they're not committed to the cost, and again, not just the cost of the e-learning and the training itself, but the cost of putting people in the training and paying them while they're there, you are better off not implementing the program, because it will die, because you will get it started and it will fail for all the wrong reasons, which is that the people in the front office didn't recognize how important this program is and e-learning is. Now, the good news is that more and more executives every day are understanding the value of incumbent worker training. And we have seen this tide shift significantly in the last 5 to 10 years, but there are still some executives hanging on to the old way of doing things, hanging on to the old idea of managing their workforces and creating career pathways. In many cases was not creating pathways at all. That is all starting to change. Just make sure that your C-suite is on board when you implement your e-learning platform. Number 9 e-learning mistake is creating content that is too narrow. What I mean by this, and we get phone calls quite frequently in our business where we'll get a call from somebody who says, hey, I want to train on PLCs. I want to teach my people about pneumatics. I want them to learn about mechanical drives, or I want them to learn about basic AC/DC circuits, or I want them to learn about troubleshooting. Now, understand, those are all really, really important things for people to be learning. Those are all really, really important competencies for our team members to have. But what we don't want to do is just train on a really, really narrow set of competencies. Because the truth of the matter is that everything in manufacturing is interrelated. Everything is connected. Everything requires an understanding, a basic understanding of AC/DC electrical systems. Almost every one of our production lines relies on electric relays and electric relay controls. They all have electric motors. They all have programmable logic controllers. We need to understand things like ladder logic. They've all got mechanical drives, meaning pulleys and gears and shafts and sprockets. They all have automation, or at least many of them do. So we need to understand a little bit about robotics. They've all got sensors. They've all got smart devices. They all require a knowledge of lean manufacturing. They all require us to work safely. So when we think about all of these things and how interconnected they are, and then how all of the data that comes off of our equipment and is available to us now in this era of informationable data how much data is available from this equipment, we start to understand the importance of having an interconnected learning program where employees are learning multiple aspects and myriad aspects of Industry 4.0 and advanced manufacturing, and starting to put the pieces together so that when they go back to the production line, they don't just understand the PLC that's at the production line, or they don't just understand the human machine interface that's at the production line, but they understand all of the inputs and outputs. They understand the electrical circuits. They understand the smart sensors and devices that are gathering data in real time, sending pertinent information back to our control systems, sending that information in the form of actions to output devices like motors, like electric motors, like cooling coils, like fans, all of these different technologies that are on our manufacturing operations. Understanding how all of those pieces fit together is really, really important. The final e-learning mistake that we see when people choose an e-learning platform and when they implement that e-learning platform is ignoring the value of metrics. We obsess over metrics and measurements in every aspect of manufacturing. Think about it. What do we measure in manufacturing? We measure on-time delivery. We measure quality. We measure efficiency. We measure productivity. We measure how many hours our people are at lunch, how many hours our people are working at the production line. We measure revenue. We measure cost of goods sold. We measure our production margin, both on a direct basis and on an incremental basis. All of these different things that we're measuring in manufacturing. But yet when it comes to training, very few companies implement the right metrics. And when I say the right metrics, here's what I mean. A lot of people try to tie training to a return on investment. Now, there's ways that we can do that in the same way that we can create or determine the ROI on a new press brake, the ROI on a new machining center by looking at additional revenue, additional margin, cost reductions, and then comparing that to the upfront capital cost. It's harder to do that with training. What is the value of an individual walking onto your shop floor who understands every single technology that they are going to encounter over the course of a day? And how will that reduce downtime? How will it increase productivity? How will it increase yield? It's really, really difficult to measure all those variables. Not impossible, but difficult. Instead, we like to focus on things like this. What are the competencies that we want our people to learn? Are they learning those competencies? If we created a custom pathway for an individual to go through in terms of a list of courses, are they going through those courses? Are they going through them in the right order? How long is it taking them to get through each course? How do they do on the pre-quiz? How did they do on the post-quiz? And did the post-quiz results beat or improve on the pre-quiz results? In other words, are they learning something while they are in the e-learning platform? How many of our learners have taken their e-assessments and been placed in a course? And if we're supposed to be training 2 hours a week, that's our recommendation. Let's get back to the 1970s where the average manufacturing employee received 100 hours of skills-based training every single year, 2 hours a week. Let's get back to that. Today, the average is about 5, so we have a lot of work to do. But are they going through their courses? If we are saying you should be in a training program 2 hours a week, are they actually doing it? And then measure that. Measure it every day, measure it every week, measure it every month, and make sure that you are living up to the goals that you set initially. Because the truth of the matter is training is always what we call important, not urgent. That goes back to the old Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Put your tasks into those 4 quadrants, and the quadrant that is important but not urgent, those are always the ones that we put off forever, but they are the ones that can make the biggest difference in our organization. Training is important, not urgent. We have to do it. We have to do it because we know it's a good idea. We have to do it even when it hurts a little bit. We have to do it even when we wish all of our people were on the floor, because the truth of the matter is if we don't do it today, it's going to hurt us tomorrow. So make sure that you're measuring your training program, that you're reaching your goals, that you're completing the number of courses and teaching the number of competencies that you agreed you would teach initially. So that's it. Our top 10 e-learning mistakes that we see through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of customers, thousands and tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of students and learners who have gone through e-learning programs that we have provided. Those are the things we want to avoid when choosing and implementing an e-learning platform. And with that, Melissa, I will send it back to you for any questions that rolled in from the audience.
Thanks, Matt. Just a couple of audience questions here. The first one, in your experience, have employers had better success limiting employees' access to e-learning while at work or giving them access to do the e-learning from home?
It
anytime.
depends on the culture of the company, to be quite honest, because I've worked with companies where, all the work is done in the plant. They're really focused on how many hours people are working. They don't want their people doing work if they're not being paid, and they don't want to pay people for doing work if they're not at the plant. That's okay if that's your culture, but you're going to have to fit your e-learning program in that way, especially in an era now where we're moving more and more towards distance work, where we're moving more and more toward, we used to have flipped classrooms, now we have flipped workplaces where we can do a lot of our work offsite and just come to the office for the really important stuff. So in that case, it's a great idea on the e-learning platform to have your learners going through that at home if that's something that fits. And maybe you choose to pay them for doing that work. Maybe depending on the state you're in, that you have to pay them for doing that work. But I can tell you that one of the things that's creating some challenges in our workplaces in manufacturing right now is a level of resentment that's coming along from the hourly folks who have to be at the plant 40, 50, 60 hours a week, whatever it is, where some of their counterparts in the front office are able to work from home. And that creates a level of resentment between those two groups. And in many companies, there's already a fair amount of resentment between the office staff and the manufacturing staff anyway. So that's a really good way to be able to provide some flexibility to your plant floor, provide some flexibility to your manufacturing staff to be able to say, look, if you're going to be running a punch press, if you're going to be running a machining center, if you're going to be loading and unloading a piece of equipment or tending a robot that's doing that work, of course we need you in the manufacturing plant. But to the extent that we can also offer you the benefit of doing some flexible working by doing your e-learning at home. A good e-learning platform will enable a learner to access the platform from anywhere via the cloud, online with a login. So it doesn't matter if they're at home, if they're at work, if they're on their computer, if they're on their iPad, they can get to it wherever they are. And so I would say without question, it's a good idea if you can to enable your learners to be able to do the learning from home.
Awesome. Next question is it better to find a platform that specializes in the area that my sector is in, or find one that's more general manufacturing?
Depends on your business and what you want your people to learn. What we tell people is that most of the platforms that we offer will get you 80% of the way there. In other words, if you've got some really, really specific type of manufacturing equipment, maybe it's some custom process that you created yourself. Of course, we don't have an e-learning platform that matches exactly what those competencies are. And even if we did, we'd have to charge you $2 million for it because you're the only customer that would want it. So the truth of the matter is it's going to be really hard to find a platform that perfectly matches what you have in your manufacturing floor. The way we go about this is to teach what we call associative skills and competencies. So if I learn G code or M code on a CNC simulator, I can take that to work, and somebody probably has to show me how that manifests itself on our particular machining center, but I'm going to be 80% of the way there. So I think it's a really, really good idea for us to understand the value of general associative skills, but we can also get pretty specific. So we can train just on CNC. We can train just on a specific brand of robot. We can train just on a specific brand of programmable logic controller. So you'd be surprised how well a specific e-learning platform can match the competencies in your organization. But there's always going to be that little bit of a gap that you or somebody on your team has to fill in terms of showing your learner how what they learned in their e-learning manifests itself in your particular process.
Absolutely. All right, Matt, I think we have time for one final question. And this says, regarding your point number 4 about learners who might not want to participate in learning, for those who might be on the fence or are kind of apathetic, what are some good tips for incentivizing them?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is we start with the idea that anymore we have an absolute obligation to be lifelong learners. The truth is we don't live in a world where you can get a job out of high school and have that job for 40 years and retire and go off and live at your lake house. We had that situation here in the United States 40, 50 years ago. You could graduate from high school and have a lifelong sustaining career based upon what you knew as you got to the workplace and learned your job. That is not the world of manufacturing anymore. Manufacturing is constantly changing. It's data-driven. It's driven by smart sensors and smart devices. These are the technologies that will drive the future. So if you as an employee want to remain relevant in your skill set, if you want to continue to be paid above market wages as we are in manufacturing, it's your obligation to be a lifelong learner. So that's what we start with, is that it's just a mindset. We should be lifelong learners. We have to be, or the world is going to pass us by. If that isn't good enough, or maybe in addition to that, we have clients that will align in e-learning requirements or competencies or certifications in some cases to job promotions. So in other words, if you're a maintenance tech 1 and you want to be a maintenance tech 2, there's a list of criteria that you have to meet, and 1 or 2 of those criteria may be related to the level of training that you have toward that program. And so they actually make sitting for the training program or earning a industrially relevant certification as a criteria for getting promoted. Some organizations will say if you are in this certification or you go through this training program that you'll get an addition to your hourly rate. And so those are just some of those incentives that we see people putting in front of them. We never want to do it with a stick. We want people to understand the value of lifelong learning. And then as they're gaining additional competencies, as they're able to add additional value for the company, a good company is going to want to pay them more, and we'll find ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points and some great pieces of advice on incentivizing those employees. All right, so I think that'll wrap it up for those questions. Matt, I'll leave it to you to close things out for us today.
All right, well, thank you, Melissa. Thanks everybody for being on. Great questions from the audience, so I really appreciate that. We can always tell how engaged our audience has been at the end of Webinar Wednesday based upon the quality and thoughtfulness of the questions, and those were some very well thought out questions. Hope this was helpful, understanding a little bit about those mistakes that we have to avoid when we're implementing an e-learning program and when we are choosing an e-learning platform. If you avoid these mistakes, the results are absolutely incredible. So I thank you for being here on Webinar Wednesday. Next week, we have a great episode lined up for you. Joe Baldiga, who's the Director of CNC Education for Fanuc America. Many of you know Fanuc is a huge robotics company. They are also the largest producer of CNC controls in the world. And Joe is their Director of Education. He has a brand new relationship with Doosan, a machine tool builder many of you are familiar with, and it is enabling the Fanuc distribution network to offer Doosan machining centers with Fanuc controls to people across education. It's really, really cool technology. It's a really, really cool relationship that they have. And we're going to tell you all about it next week on Webinar Wednesday. As you know, we are here every single Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.